What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 1992 Daihatsu HiJet. Below me is a 660cc 3-cylinder engine, as well as a 4-speed manual transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this Daihatsu HiJet for one main reason, and that's the fact that I'm on the left side of the car. That's right, Daihatsu, although it's been selling vehicles all over the world since the 50s, they existed in the American market for 5 years. From 1987 to 1992. And so this is one of the last vehicles they ever sold in the US. This is an American market Daihatsu HiJet. I didn't know that existed, and so I'm excited to share that with you today. But before we get on to anything else, I have a website, zackpradel.com, where you can buy stickers and other merchandise when it becomes available. You can also submit your own vehicle to be reviewed by me through a quick and easy submission form, especially if you yourself have a Daihatsu Charade or Rocky. And you can read my behind the scenes blog to see what I'm filming before it comes out on the channel. But let's get back to that 660cc engine down below. It's only 3 cylinders, it's carbureted, and this actually has a Chinese Amazon carburetor on it right now, and it's 660 cc's because that was the requirements for K vehicles over in Japan. K vehicles are a classification of car that are small, have small engines, and in return, you get tax benefits and other things like that over in Japan. They're extremely popular in Japan. However, this truck wasn't meant for Japan. We'll talk about Daihatsu's story in America during the final thoughts segment, but the abridged version is basically they wanted to sell vehicles here, they didn't want to completely engineer a new vehicle, so they just brought over what they were already making. Like I said, paired to it, 4-speed manual, incredibly short gears, because this vehicle was actually only made to go off-road. It was never meant to be an on-road vehicle. So the gearing is really, really short. However, I do have a 2-speed transfer case. I can put it in low or high, which helps out slightly. Last but not least, this is only 2-wheel drive. So how does it feel to actually drive the Daihatsu HiJet? Where's third? Okay, that's second. Is that third? That's third. It sucks. This thing is terrible because it wasn't meant to go on city streets. And that'll become very clear with the interior. Speaking of, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have a speedometer that only goes up to 25 miles an hour. That's the red line. That's the maximum speed it was allowed. There actually were restrictors to not allow it to go above 25 miles an hour. Now, those have been removed for this particular HiJet, but pretty funny to see. Off to the right, I have my warning lights, as well as coolant temperature and fuel. The steering wheel doesn't have anything on it besides the horn button, and of course, a little HiJet badge. And then I have a bunch of dead switches off to the left. This ominous blank switch used to be the fuel pump, because this used to have an aftermarket fuel pump, but that's actually been fixed, so this switch goes back to doing nothing. On the door, you get a bunch of information about the truck, as well as a big label for unleaded only, and the previous owner has written down the oil filter size, just so you don't forget. Moving into the center, there's a little tray. I have 2 climate control vents, my climate controls themselves, no radio, so you don't get any music at all, ashtray, a spot for a cigarette lighter, nothing on the floor, and then the shifter itself. The shifter is a little ball peen up at the top, kind of interesting feeling, and it is decently tall. However, the actual gates themselves feel pretty good, but it is a very odd experience. Then in the center, I have my handbrake, high-low, and that's it. I don't get any cup holders, of course, meaning the Daihatsu HiJet fails the big friggin' bottle test. The seats are actually decently comfortable, and the reason I say actually is because a lot of K trucks in this class over in Japan, they actually bolted the seats to the back of the truck. They bolted them directly to the bulkhead. Well, because this is actually an extended cab, they have full seats, so they're actually a lot comfier. Behind the seats isn't really anything. It is the extended cab, however, it doesn't give you storage or speakers or anything of that sort. However, speaking of cargo space, let's hop out and talk about the bed. Now, the bed is pretty spacious, and it does one of my favorite things that K-Trucks do, which is the fact that you can fold down all 3 bed sides to create a flat bed. There's also this giant metal circle in the middle. This is actually covering up the gas filler cap. This is not the factory location for that. It would normally come out one of the sides. However, the gas tank in this truck completely rusted through, and so a previous owner actually put a boat gas tank in it, and that's the way you fill it up. So not standard, but pretty interesting, I think. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and visually it's not anything special. It looks like every other K-truck I've ever driven. They were white because they were meant to be used by businesses or companies and painted whatever color. It was also a cheap color to paint the vehicle. And overall, it's almost indistinguishable from any other K-truck I've ever driven. They all have little headlights. They all have beds that fold flat. That's pretty much it. But let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving it? Whatever. But I think this thing is incredibly cool, and so let's talk about Daihatsu in the United States. So, in the late 80s, there was a huge influx and need for imported vehicles. It was a lagged response to the gas crisis of the 1970s, and Americans were demanding more efficient cars. So, importers took advantage of this demand and began searching far and wide for the next best economy car. This is why Malcolm Bricklin imported the Yugo. Hyundai got their start in the US with the Hyundai Excel, and there was even an attempt to import the Malaysian-built Proton. Toyota saw this trend and decided it was their turn to bring a new name to the US market. That name was one that they became a major shareholder in since 1976. That name was Daihatsu. They debuted in the US with this, the HiJet, in 1987. But a year later, they began offering the Charade as a hatchback and later as a sedan, as well as the Rocky, which was a pocket-sized off-roader. All 3 of these vehicles sold incredibly poorly. This truck was meant to be a utility truck and offer a cheap alternative to other workhorses. The problem was, the HiJet wouldn't pass US regulations. And so, instead of scrapping the project, Daihatsu America decided to sell them for off-road use only. If you look on the door, it says, "Warning, never drive this vehicle on public streets, roads, or highways. This vehicle is designed and manufactured for off-road use only. This vehicle complies with neither the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards nor the Environmental Protection Agency regulations." So I have never seen in a vehicle a label that says, "Do not drive this. It is not okay." And so because of this, it failed. Considering that America was also in a slight recession in the 1990s, the plug was pulled on Daihatsu in 1992, and they left the market altogether, and they haven't returned since. The Charade was outpurchased by the Corolla and other imports. The Rocky was outsold by the Samurai. Even when the Samurai got all the bad press, they still sold more than the Rocky. So after only 5 model years in February of 1992, Daihatsu left the market, making these trucks and American spec Daihatsus and all really, really rare and hard to come by. That's why I was so incredibly excited to drive this HiJet, because it's a left-hand drive American market Daihatsu. That doesn't come around all that much, and I wasn't even fully aware of the scope that Daihatsu had in the States during the late 80s and early 90s. Obviously, it wasn't that much. So this is a K-truck. It's Japanese, but it was meant for us Americans. It just wasn't meant for our roads. Now, since it's actually considered an antique, there are certain districts, counties, and states that will allow you to plate this vehicle. However, there are some modifications that you'll need. First of all, that Speedo cable has those governors on that. You'll have to remove those. As well as there's a little E-clip on the 2-speed transfer case that doesn't allow you to even put it into high gear. You'll have to remove that as well, which has been done on this HiJet, so you can actually put it into high gear and travel at normal speeds. That's right, that's why there's no H on the high-low transfer case, because they didn't even want you to put it in, but the only way they stopped you from doing that was a tiny little clip. So you just have to go into the transmission and remove that. This car is incredibly unique. I think it's an incredibly special and interesting look at the late 80s manufacturers and just market for vehicles. I've driven 2 Daihatsus before, another HiJet from Japan, as well as the Midget 2. And those were cool and unique because they were from Japan, right-hand drive, all these things. I had no idea that we even got them here in the States until I drove this. This is so cool. I hope you learned something about Daihatsu. They're an interesting company. They still do produce cars. However, they've pulled out of the European and Australian markets later on in the 2000s, so they're really only home to Asia now. But for today, I hope you enjoyed this Daihatsu HiJet. Huge thank you to Matt and Al for letting me take out their HiJet. This was such a cool and unique piece of machinery. I was so excited to tell Daihatsu's story and so excited to learn about Daihatsu's story. Matt and Al are awesome. They have their own YouTube channel, Wisco Shenanigans, where they're always doing something cool, fun, and unique with cars, so I can't recommend them enough. Please go check them out. Their YouTube channel will be linked in the description below. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.